While President Biden continues to work on the second COVID relief bill and economic plan and attempts to gain bipartisan support there, new Washington Post report claims that millions of jobs will never come back, particularly low-skilled labor.
So, Don Calloway, CEO of Pine Street Strategies, is joining us now, along with co-host of the Realignment podcast, our friend Marshall Kosloff. They're back to weigh in. Don, let me start with you. A lot of rumblings here in Washington around the second COVID relief plan, as well as infrastructure. There's not been a firm commitment yet by the White House on what that infrastructure package is going to look like. Everybody from Joe Manchin calling for a $4 trillion package to some saying that that's wildly out of step. How do you think Democrats should approach this one? Because this isn't exactly something that they could get through reconciliation and have to go through regular order. Generally, how should the Biden team play this after the reconciliation $2 trillion bill comes to the floor?
You got to go big. I mean, this is the opportunity for Democrats across the board to flex the power that they do have, which they'll only have for another 18 months, right? You cannot assume that you'll have majorities in either chamber after 2022's midterms. You have to go for as big as a package as is reasonably acceptable. There's no sense, and I don't mean to, be too philosophical or flag wave here, but there's no sense in having the richest nation on earth and bragging about that if you're not willing to go as big as possible in a generationally definitive economic struggle. So I think that one of the things that concerns me is that it's easy to talk about top line numbers. Is it going to be 1.9 trillion or 2 trillion or 4 trillion, right? But the devil is in the details. So is there money for retraining? We can talk about infrastructure and we can talk about upgrading our electrical grids, but is there money for training people for jobs in that? And that those details have to be really filled out about what is this money going to, as opposed to just these really top line headline making numbers. And I think that Democrats will end up having not only the retraining money in there, but public affairs money, which tells people what's available and teaches people about how to apply for and make these monies and opportunities available to them. So I do think that a package will come together that will be significant and will be really have a lot of utility for a broad sector of the American people once Democrats get past all the procedural stuff like reconciliation and how they're going to get it done.
Yeah, and part of what's being reported by the Washington Post, Marshall, is that, I'm just going to read from them, Democrats are expected to try to pay for parts of the infrastructure package, possibly as much as half of it, through new tax increases on wealthy individuals and corporations. So the idea is, on the one hand, you have massive infrastructure spending that's going to create a lot of jobs, hopefully a lot of good-paying union jobs to help to bolster the middle and working class. On the other end, you're going to pay for it largely through taxes on the wealthy and corporations. What do you think of that structure? And then, look, if this is going through regular order and Joe Manchin's not going to move on the filibuster, then you got to get 10 Republicans on board. Is that feasible at all?
Yeah, so this is the perfect encapsulation of the different trends and different factors that are polling Democrats on this, which is, on the one hand, there's the need to, as we were just talking about, deliver those key priorities for people that were very specifically promised, especially in Georgia. But also there's also a need that, hey, there's a lot of people in the Democratic Party who do have concerns about the deficit. And there are a lot of Republicans who, if you're going to get them to come on, are going to need to have the are going to need to have the spending somewhat dealt with. At the same time, the Republicans aren't particularly excited about tax increases, obviously. So it's going to be difficult to pull all these threads together. And the thing that's difficult here is I feel like the longer you wait, the less pressing it feels, the more difficult it will be to force something through.
Yeah, Marshall, just to follow up on that, do you think that it would be possible to get, we've had several Republicans on the record, at least 5 or 6 who were on board with the Trump $2 trillion or so infrastructure package. Do you think they would be able to politically feasibly go along with the Biden administration on this?
Skeptical. Just given the fact that there's, once again, they have their own competing things to balance too, and from their perspective, I think they would want this to be offset in the budget, and the tax increases just aren't going to fly.
Yeah, that's interesting.
And Don, part of why this is so significant is the reporting that we mentioned in the lead, which is that millions of the jobs that were lost, they're not coming back. So the first relief bill, the idea is to kind of like plug the immediate hole, but you got to do something more to deal with some of the structural issues. Now, do I think that infrastructure alone will deal with that? No, but it's a step in the right direction here. Do you think that if Republicans completely stonewall on something like infrastructure, which again, massively bipartisan popular support, Do you think that Manchin, Sinema, and others will rethink their position on the filibuster?
I don't see them rethinking their position on the filibuster because that opens the door for Washington, D.C. and Puerto Rican statehood. That opens the door for discussions about reparations and a whole bunch of other stuff that they really don't want to visit. So I don't think that Democrats are going to be in a position to get overwhelming support on ending the filibuster, which is unfortunate because, it's time to say the stuff that we need to say, that the filibuster is a relic of the Jim Crow era in the United States Senate, right, which blocked a whole lot of civil rights legislation for women and African-American progress and so on and so forth. But I do think that it's about the messaging at this point. There will be money for infrastructure. Yes, a lot of the old manufacturing jobs are not coming back, but we're going to have to teach people to lay broadband fiber optic cables, right? And that increases broadband access in rural areas as well as in overly congested and underserved urban areas, right? So that's beyond political allegiance. We're going to have to teach people to upgrade our energy infrastructure, weatherize, winterize, so that we can survive 100 or even 50-year events like we're seeing right now in Texas. And those jobs are nonpartisan. So there is opportunity here for retraining, even if we don't talk specifically about what the new jobs of the future are going to be. There are opportunities for real jobs if we just commit to upgrading infrastructure in a substantial way.
Great points from you both. We really appreciate you guys joining us. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, gang.
Coming up, author and professor of economics, Stephanie Kelton. She's going to talk about why means testing stimulus checks is a really bad idea when rising returns.